No matter how many times I go over this, the speed of it still gets me. 20 years of nothing, and then everything at once.
And most people still think they know what it is. They tried it once. Got an answer. Moved on. They stopped right before it gets interesting.
That's what we're here to talk about. What's actually happening underneath. Living in the loop.
How a quiet shift in working with AI is changing what one person can do.
For 60 years, artificial intelligence was a promise. A research project locked inside university laboratories, discussed at conferences, written about in papers almost no one read. The experts said it would change everything, someday, but someday kept getting pushed back. The technology wasn't ready. The funding dried up. Winters came and went. The researchers kept working. The world stopped paying attention. Then, in late 2022, something changed. Not gradually, almost overnight. What had been a research curiosity became a website anyone could visit. Type a question. Get a response that sounded human, with way more nuance than Siri. 100 million people in 2 months. The fastest growing application in history. The public conversation has been loud ever since. Anxious. Will it take our jobs? Can we trust what it says? Is it actually thinking or just pretending? Headlines compete for the most alarming angle. Experts disagree on almost everything. But underneath all that noise, something quieter is happening. Something most people haven't noticed. Not a debate about what AI might do someday. A shift in how certain people are already working. Right now. In private.
Here's what that actually looks like. It's 2 in the morning. You have something that needs handling. A situation at work. A difficult conversation you've been putting off. Something where getting it wrong makes things worse. You've tried writing it yourself. 3 drafts. Nothing feels right. Too aggressive. Too passive. Not quite your voice. So you open a conversation. And you just describe the situation. What happened? What you're trying to accomplish. What you're worried about. It gives you something back. You read it. Not quite. The tone is off. You say so. It tries again. Closer. But now it's overcorrecting. You push back. 3rd try, 4th. Something in the 2nd paragraph catches your eye. That part. That's actually good. You grab it. Build around it. 20 minutes later, something is sitting in front of you that didn't exist before. It's not perfect. But it's real. And it sounds like you.
This is what's actually happening right now. Not in research labs, not at technology conferences. In living rooms, at kitchen tables, in bedrooms at 2 in the morning when someone can't sleep because something is weighing on them. Most people who found this way of working didn't learn it from a course. They weren't taught a method. They stumbled into it. Late at night. Under pressure. Trying to solve a problem that wouldn't wait until morning. And then something shifted. Not in the tool. In them. In how they approached almost anything that required thought.
The strange part is what happens after a few weeks of this. The things you used to do separately. Writing, planning, researching, thinking through a problem. They start to feel like the same activity. Shaping material. That's all it is. Getting something in front of you. Feeling whether it's right. Pushing it closer. Recognizing when it finally clicks.
That's not a threat. It's not something to be afraid of. It's closer to a secret. A creative formula that most people walk right past because they're still looking for a vending machine. And once you've felt it, once you've experienced what it's like to shape something this way,
you don't really go back. Not because you can't. Because the old way stops making sense.
To understand what's actually happening here, you have to look closer at that moment. The moment when someone stops asking for answers and starts shaping something instead. Because from the outside it looks like typing. Someone at a keyboard staring at a screen. Nothing remarkable, but something very specific is happening in that exchange. Something most people never discover because they leave too early.
Let me tell you about a night. A real one. Someone I know. He had a situation at work that had been building for weeks. The kind where every option felt like a trap. Say nothing, it gets worse. Say something wrong, it blows up. He'd tried writing it himself. Multiple times. One draft came out too aggressive, deleted. Next one too passive. Sounded weak. Third one was technically fine but read like it was written by someone else entirely. None of them were him. It was after midnight when he finally opened a different kind of conversation. Not to ask for a template. Not to get advice. Just to describe the situation. Out loud, almost. To something that would listen without judging.
This is the part that surprises people. The technology isn't magic. It doesn't read minds. It doesn't know what you actually need. It only knows what you tell it. And most people don't tell it very much. They type a sentence or two. Get something back. It's not quite right. So they assume the technology failed. They don't realize they only gave it fragments to work with. Puzzle pieces without the picture on the box.
But he did something different. He described everything. The history. The personalities involved. What he'd already tried. What he was afraid might happen. What he actually wanted, underneath it all. It took him 10 minutes just to lay it out. What came back wasn't one answer. It was 20 different approaches. Some were terrible. A few were dangerous. But scattered in there were 2 or 3 he hadn't considered. Angles he couldn't see because he was too close to the situation.
This is what people miss about the technology. It's not an oracle. It doesn't know the right answer. But it can hold more context than you can. It can generate more variations than you'd ever write yourself. It gives you something to react to. And here's the secret. Reacting is easier than creating from nothing. Saying not that, but closer to this, is easier than staring at a blank page. The material gives you something to push against.
So he grabbed one of those options. Not perfect, but promising. And he pushed back. That's close, but the tone is too formal. This is a colleague, not a stranger. We have history. It adjusted. Better. Still not right. Now it's too casual. I need them to know this is serious without sounding like a threat. Another adjustment. That phrase in the second paragraph. That's exactly it. But the opening is still wrong. 40 minutes of this. Small adjustments. Specific feedback. More direct here. Softer there. That word isn't me. What's another way to say this? Until finally, something was sitting in front of him that he could actually send.
That's not what most people imagine when they think about AI. They imagine asking a question and getting an answer. One exchange. Done. But this was 40 exchanges. Each one a small correction. A refinement. A push in a specific direction. The technology didn't write that message. And he didn't write it alone. Something in between happened. A collaboration where one side generates possibilities and the other side recognizes which possibilities are right.
And here's what surprised him most. The thing he sent? It worked. Not because the AI gave him the right words. But because going through that process forced him to figure out what he actually wanted to say. The conversation clarified his own thinking. The act of pushing back. Saying not that over and over. It surfaced what he actually meant. Things he couldn't have articulated if he just sat there trying to think.
This is the part that doesn't fit the headlines. The AI isn't replacing human thinking. It's creating the conditions for human thinking to happen, giving you something to react to. Externalizing the conversation you'd normally have with yourself. Except now that conversation moves faster, and it leaves a trail you can look at, edit, reconsider, build on tomorrow.
That night, he solved one problem. But something else happened too. He discovered a way of working. A process he could use again. And he started using it for everything.
That's when it stops being a tool you use sometimes, and starts becoming the way you think. There's a misconception about how this works. People assume you're extracting something. Like mining. You go in, you pull out what's there, you leave. But that's not what's happening at all. What's actually happening is closer to sculpture. You're not pulling out something that was already there. You're shaping something that didn't exist until you started working it. The material is generated fresh each time, and it becomes something through the pressure you apply.
Here's what that actually feels like. You ask for something. It gives you a version. And immediately, you feel something. Not quite. Or, close, but the tone is wrong. Or, wait, that phrase. That's actually better than what I had in my head. That feeling is the whole game. That instant sense of yes, no, or almost. You can't always explain it. But you know it when you see it. Something either lands or it doesn't. Something either sounds like you or it doesn't.
This is where most people fall out of the process. And it happens in one of two ways. Two traps that look completely different but lead to the same place. Nothing gets made. The first trap is passivity. You look at what it generates. It's not quite right. But instead of pushing back, you wait. You ask again. You hope the next version will magically be what you wanted. You're waiting to receive instead of working to shape.
I see this all the time. Someone asks for something. Gets a draft back. It's not right. So they ask again with slightly different words. Still not right. They try a third time. A fourth. Never once do they say, this part is good. This part is wrong. Here's specifically what I need different. They're treating it like a slot machine. Pull the lever. Hope for a jackpot. Pull again. But sculpture doesn't work that way. You have to put your hands on the material. You have to push.
The second trap is the opposite. Perfectionism. You look at what it generates. It's not perfect. So you stop. You decide the technology doesn't work. Or you decide you'll come back later when you have more time to get it right. But later never comes. It's easy to expect finished work on the first try. And when it's not perfect, to conclude the technology failed. But the value isn't in the first response. It's in the 20th, after you've shaped it.
What works is staying with it. Treating every response as material. Keeping the good parts. Calling out the bad parts. Not that. Try this instead. Having a conversation, not placing an order. And over time, sometimes an hour, sometimes weeks, something starts to happen. The fragments start to connect. Ideas that seemed separate begin to rhyme. A viewpoint emerges that wasn't there when you started.
This is what we mean by living in the loop. Not a single session, not one question and one answer, but an ongoing relationship with material that develops over time. You come back to it. It remembers where you left off. The thinking accumulates.
Here's something people don't realize you can do. You can just ask it, do we have enough? You've told it what you're making. Who it's for. What tone you need. And at some point you just say, based on everything we've discussed, do you have enough to try a draft? Or are there gaps? And it will tell you. Sometimes it says yes, I can work with this. Sometimes it says I can try, but here's what's missing. Important gaps versus optional ones. Directions you might explore first. It's holding more context than you can track, and it can see what's lacking.
This is the strange part. The technology can hold more context than you can consciously track. It's seen everything you fed it, and sometimes it knows you're ready before you do, or it knows what's missing that you've forgotten to mention.
And sometimes the problem isn't missing information. It's information stuck inside you that won't come out through effort. Things you know but can't say directly. So you do something strange. You ask it to interview you. One question at a time, slowly. The answers come differently that way. Not as careful statements. As impressions. Off-the-cuff reactions to what the interviewer asks. Things you didn't know you thought until someone asked the right question. That kind of knowledge doesn't come out sequentially. It comes out sideways.
And there comes a moment, you can actually feel it, when something that's been formless starts to feel ready. Like it wants to come out now. Like you've been circling it for days and suddenly there it is. The gaps have filled. The shape is clear. That readiness isn't something the technology announces. There's no notification, no green light. It's a feeling in your body. A recognition. You've been shaping this thing, asking it questions, letting it ask you questions, and now it's done. You just know.
That knowing, where does it come from? Maybe years of experience. Maybe just a sense you've always had. That instinct for what works and what doesn't. What sounds like you and what doesn't. What lands and what falls flat. That's not obsolete now. That's the steering wheel. The technology generates the possibilities. You decide which ones are true. That partnership, between infinite generation and human recognition, that's the process. And once you're in it, you start to see it everywhere.
There's a question underneath all of this. The one that keeps people up at night. The one they're almost embarrassed to ask out loud. If it can do so much, what's left for me? It's a reasonable fear. Headlines tell us the machines are coming. That automation will swallow whole professions. That anything a human can do, an algorithm will eventually do faster, cheaper, at scale. The narrative is terrifying. But here's what that narrative misses. It assumes the technology works alone. That you put a task in one end and a finished product comes out the other. No human required. And that's just not what's happening.
Let me tell you what actually happens when someone tries to use this without any human shaping. A company I know tried it. They wanted to automate their customer communications. Just plug in the situation, let the AI respond, no human in the loop. The responses were technically correct, grammatically perfect, answered the question that was asked. And customers hated them. Called them cold, tone-deaf, generic. The company lost accounts. They had to bring the humans back. Because the technology doesn't know what matters. It doesn't know that this particular customer has a history. That this situation requires delicacy. That sometimes you need to read between the lines of what someone is actually asking. It just responds to what's there.
This is the part that doesn't make the headlines. The technology is powerful, remarkably powerful, but it's powerful like a river is powerful. It flows fast, it can carry you far, but it doesn't know where you're trying to go. You still need someone at the helm. And here's what changes when you understand that. All those things you've built over years, your taste, your judgment, your instinct for what works, they don't become obsolete. They become more valuable. Because now they're steering something much more powerful than you alone.
I talked to a course creator who'd been doing this for 6 months. She said something that stuck with me. I used to have ideas I couldn't execute. Now I don't. 20 years of taste. 6 months of this new way of working. And suddenly the ideas that used to stay in her head didn't have to anymore. Projects that would have taken months, she could prototype in a weekend. Things that used to require a team of specialists, she could explore alone. Not replacing her skills. Amplifying them. Letting her taste operate at a scale she couldn't reach before.
That's the shift that's actually happening. Not humans being replaced by machines. Humans becoming more capable by working with them differently. One person doing what used to require 10, not because the machine does the work, because the partnership does. But here's what's also true. Most people won't find this on their own. The skill isn't obvious, it doesn't teach itself. And there aren't many places to learn it yet. The frameworks haven't been written, the courses are just starting to exist.
The people who figured this out mostly figured it out alone. Late nights. Trial and error. Stumbling into it while trying to solve a real problem. They didn't have a map. They made one as they went. But it doesn't have to be that hard. When you watch someone else do it, when you see them shaping material in real time, making those small corrections, recognizing what works, something clicks faster than reading about it ever could.
That's why community matters now, not for networking, not for credentials, for calibration. When you see how someone else navigates this, you start to see your own patterns. What you're doing well, what you're missing. The shared discovery sharpens everyone. We're in a window right now. A strange period where the technology is available, but the methods aren't established. Where someone working alone in their living room might figure out something that becomes obvious to everyone 5 years from now.
The people who get in now, who start developing these instincts while things are still fluid, they'll have something that can't be easily replicated later. Not head starts on information. Head starts on intuition. And intuition takes time to build. That's what we're building. A room where you can develop these instincts alongside other people who are doing the same thing. Where the discovery is shared. Where the learning compounds.
Most people haven't felt this yet. They've tried the technology. Maybe they got something useful, maybe they didn't. But they haven't felt that moment when scattered thinking becomes clear. When something you couldn't articulate suddenly has form. When it finally sounds like you. That feeling is hard to describe. But once you've had it, once you've experienced what it's like to shape something this way, you understand why people keep coming back to it.
It's not about the technology. It never was. It's about what becomes possible when you learn to work this way. The things that used to seem too big. The projects you put on hold because you couldn't do them alone. The ideas that stayed half-formed for years.
They don't have to stay that way anymore. That's the invitation, not to use a tool, to discover a way of working that changes what one person can do. And once you find it, you don't really go back. Not because you can't, because it stops making sense to.